I am Patrick D. McCoy, the African-American voice in classical music, and I welcome you to today's special broadcast. Today we have a very special guest on the air with us. Our special guest today is revered by lovers of choral music around the world. His compositions are sung by choirs of all ages, from symphonic choruses to church choirs. He is currently celebrating his 25th year as conductor of the world-renowned Concordia Choir of Concordia College of Moorhead, Minnesota. We welcome Rene Clausen. Good afternoon, Dr. Clausen.
Good afternoon, Patrick. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much. It is indeed a pleasure to have you on with us today. I just reminisce on the experiences that I have had singing your pieces, such as Set Me as a Seal and All You That Have Life and Breath. So I'm so honored to have you on today.
Well, like I said, it's my pleasure, and I certainly hope it's warmer out there than it is here in Moorhead, Minnesota. It's been
a little
cold
chilly here in Washington, D.C.
But I trust that when we get out there in a week or so, it'll be warm.
Oh, yeah, I hope
so,
especially with those voices that you have to deal with, making sure that they stay in pristine condition for your concerts. I just want to talk to you about you being here in Washington. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, we certainly hope we keep them in a good, pristine condition for a long trip.
And I want to start by talking to you about the fact that the Concordia Choir will embark on its 2011 concert tour. Could you by any chance tell the listeners a little bit about where the choir will begin the tour and perhaps about some of your various stops, the highlights of your concert tour?
Sure. I don't have the tour itinerary in front of me, but I have a pretty good idea where we're going. Actually, we start out with you in D.C. area, so we'll fly from here out there and actually begin our tour. This is our Eastern Swing. The Concordia Choir usually does a 5-year rotation, so kind of northeast, southeast, south, southwest, and west. So in the 5-year swing, we pretty much cover the country. So this year is the Eastern Swing, and so we start out there and then work our way back. And so we'll be singing in the National Presbyterian Cathedral there in D.C. Other stops along the seaboard area there will be in New York City. We'll be at Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania, there at Allentown. We'll be singing at the chapel, the wonderful chapel at Yale University, there in New Haven, Connecticut. And at the chapel, the famous one, actually, I was just there last summer, at Gettysburg, at Gettysburg College in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Also a suburb of Philadelphia, that northern suburb, and it just escapes my mind what it is right now. And then we head east. I think we have 3 stops in the Ohio, which is a fairly large state. I think Columbus and Dayton, maybe Akron. I'm not quite sure there, but there's 3 stops in Ohio that are coming across, I think, into Indianapolis and into southern Wisconsin, I think, but near the university at Madison, and then back up to our Twin Cities area, Minneapolis, St. Paul, where we'll do kind of a second home concert. We have a lot of students that come from the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So that concert, the night for our home concert here in Moorhead, is kind of a second home concert for the choir, as there are a lot of family and relatives that are at that location. So that's kind of the nature of the tour this year, and it's one that we always hope we don't get blasted with snow. It's that time of year where that could very easily happen.
Yes, we've had our share of ice and snow here too, so I'm just really praying that that does not happen, that you all have a safe trip free of all of that to deal with when you're touring. So what music will listeners have an opportunity to hear on the concert, particularly the concert when they come to the performance in Washington?
Sure. I think it's going to be quite a wide-ranging and interesting program from a variety of perspectives. We're doing basically a 4-set concert, 2 larger sets separated by an intermission. In the the first set we're focusing on earlier music, not the Renaissance per se, but Baroque and classical music. We're actually beginning with Mozart's Venite Populi. It's a double choir motet with strings and continuo, and that'll be followed by his very famous communion motet Ave Verum. And then we're going to do 4 sections of the 11, so not near the whole thing, but 4 major sections of the Bach motet in E minor, Jesu meine Freude. So all of that first set uses a portative organ. Actually, we'll be carrying a real portative organ with us and a string quartet that we'll be doing with that group of literally concerted pieces. And then the second set includes the Ralph Vaughan Williams, Lord, Thou Hast Been Our Refuge, which is, again, a double choir texture, but set in Vaughan Williams' typical style of dense textures and mediant transitions or harmonic transitions and big organ. This is one that quotes the famous hymn tune, O God, Our Help in Ages Past, and uses a very, very triumphant piece. So there's that piece. And then following that and closing right before the intermission is the third movement of the Alfred Schnittke, who is a Russian modern composer. He died, I believe, in 1998. And in his music, he brings a very dramatic nationalistic style, so there's a large element of the Russian soul that is very much a part of his music, but a very modern sense of harmony and rhythm, especially harmony. It's quite strident, sometimes approaching atonal music, and then very quickly will slip back into tonality again. So and this is about a 12-minute unaccompanied piece that goes into, I want to say, 1 million parts, but it's a lot. Each of the parts divides up to 3 and 4 times into a rather chromatic flux of harmonic color that, again, moves it with great passion and intensity that's very typical of the Russian style, and is amplified by Schnittke, who has a rather relentless approach to composition. So, that's first half of the concert. Then we'll take about a 15-minute intermission, and in something that I think will be really fascinating, not only for our singers, who will be doing it every night, but our audiences too, is the third set, or the one after intermission, I'm labeling A Journey into Dreams and Imagination. And rather provocative, evocative title, I think, as it reflects the music. The first piece in that set, again by Ralph Vaughan Williams, from his 3 Shakespeare songs, The Cloud-Capped Towers, which is actually on a text by Shakespeare, which is very picturesque, a lot of madrigalisms in which he kind of expressed the meaning of the text, and it paints the picture of, as you might imagine, cloud-capped towers, being very profound kind of titanic movement of slow-moving chords, and ends quite mystically. And that will go into a piece by contemporary composer Eric Whitacre, you may be familiar with.
Yeah.
Very popular composer of many new choral works. Now it's his Leonardo Dreams of a Flying Machine, and is really kind of a takeoff on the life, or at least one section of the life of Leonardo da Vinci, where he dreams of constructing a flying machine. And it's very coloristic and picturesque, kind of sets up the idea of what it'd be like to be inside of Leonardo's head, and uses some non-traditional choral sounds, and a very fascinating piece, engaging piece for the choir to sing, and one that tends to draw the audience in. So that piece then is followed by a very unique kind of piece. I might insert at this moment that the choir will be traveling to South Korea in May for a couple of weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, we're very excited about this. We've never been that far east before. We've never gone to the far east. So in deference to that, I'm planning a couple of pieces that reflect that heritage. And so we are doing a new piece of music. It's actually called Menari and subtitled Space Music. It's by a Korean woman named Hoi Wan Woo. And in this piece, the choir, it's written actually for triple choir and separated triple choirs with gong and taiko drums and soprano soloist, all of which during the piece move around the auditorium at different times.
Wow.
And this is all, yes, it's amazing. It's written in the score that way, that at this point the choirs move and the soloist moves to different places in the hall. And then this is all also correlated with the specific directions from the composer as to the lighting. Like at this point, the lighting should be 30%. At this point, it should be 50%. At this point, it should go dark. So it's this very fascinating multimedia piece in Korean that utilizes these triple choirs that kind of rotate in various places throughout the hall, using both the traditional singing techniques and non-traditional sounds too. And actually in this piece, the students do what's called overtone singing and create different overtones by singing really just one pitch, but by manipulating their jaw can create, and their pharynx, the whole pharyngeal mechanism, can create different overtones. And what happens then, they're kind of spread around when they do this, is as one series of overtones produced by one student meets another one, it can create a whole other set of overtones. So it's this rather unique piece that I think audiences will just love. It's a very engaging, theatrical, dramatic piece of music. So that is kind of one of the three major pieces in that set, and then we're going to close that set with a piece on an old text, actually, called Christ the Apple Tree by a student at St. Olaf College. I believe he's a senior this year. So what's kind of interesting about this is that this piece is written by a composer, a young composer, that's the same age as the students that I have. And I think that's kind of fascinating for them to be singing a piece of an exact contemporary of theirs. And it's a very beautifully, elegantly designed piece that will then follow that set with an arrangement of Craig Hella-Johnson called Light of a Clear Blue Morning. So I think that will be a very wide-ranging, contrasting, but yet unified set by this kind of dreams and imagination. All of these pieces take you to somewhere else. So then, we'll take a little break then. In the final set, we always have what I call the ice cream set, or the dessert set. And in that, we have various types of folk songs. We're both doing American and British folk songs. One, the American, is Shenandoah. Will be coming through the Shenandoah River Valley out there in the East Coast. And when we've gone east before, audiences have appreciated the James Earp's beautiful sonorous setting of the folk song Shenandoah. And then a British one, a British arrangement of Marianne, a very wonderful kind of melancholy tune about celebrating a lost love. And then we'll do some traditional literature from the Concordia tradition of F. Milius Christiansen, his setting of Wake Awake, his son Paul Jay's setting of The King of Love My Shepherd Is, and the old Irish folk tune, and close with our traditional closing of F. Milius' setting of Beautiful Savior. So that's the shape of the program.
That sounds like a magnificent program. And just to go back to when you mentioned Shannon Doyle and James Erb, myself being from Virginia, singing in choirs, most of us in that region know that James Erb taught for many years at the University of Richmond and directed the Richmond Symphony Chorus. So he's certainly a staple, in the choral community back home in Richmond, and certainly in our nation. I want to move on to your Set Me as a Seal. I would say probably, I guess in my opinion, I'm not sure if this is validated, but it has to be your best-known work, choral work sung by choirs. But what most people don't know is that it comes from a larger work. Could you speak a little bit about your cantata, A New Creation, and how that all came about?
Yeah, I'm glad you know that. Not a lot of people know that. That work is essentially the central movement of a larger church cantata, as you mentioned, called A New Creation. In the context of A New Creation, it's not called Set Me as a Seal. It's called Hymn. I don't know if you've seen that in the score, but I believe it's the sixth or seventh movement, and I just simply entitled it Hymn, and it's the singular section or movement of that piece that's unaccompanied. When I wrote A New Creation for a group, a church choir, and I believe Rockford, Connecticut, so out on the East Coast, I chose a set of texts that were various kinds of discussions between God and humans, both from the human aspect, from the God aspect. So I have a lot of variations of the same kinds of themes of love, of joy, of disappointment, of anxiety, of doubt. A lot of these themes come through in the cantata. But when it came to the text, Set Me as a Seal upon Your Heart, I found that, and it's been true since, in the many years since I've written that piece, that this hits people from a lot of different directions. There's something about that text, Set me as a seal upon your heart, for love is strong as death. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it. That is applicable at different stages of people's lives. For instance, that's been sung at many weddings and also at many funerals. It has a kind of encompassing meaning, I think, that, and when I said it in relative simplicity, really quite a simple, straightforward piece, but yet I think it goes to the heart of that text, and so I think it can act as a benediction for a lot of different types of events, and anywhere from a concert piece to someone's wedding, like I said, to a funeral. As a matter of fact, that I just thought of this, but I had a very kind of Twilight Zone experience with that piece a number of years ago. I don't know if you recall, but there was I think it was a U.S. Air flight that went down right off the coast of Miami, and I think they found out later there were some air oxygen canisters that exploded. But anyway, there were, I think, 70-some people on that flight, and it was right off the coast of Miami. And I remember my choir meets from 4:30 to 6 o'clock every day, and I usually get home around 6:15 or so. And as often is the case, my wife was in the kitchen making dinner, and I walked in the back door, and we have on our kitchen counter one of those, a little TV like a lot of people have, watching TV or the news and making dinner. And I walked in the back door, and in a kind of freaky occurrence, I said, that set me as a seal coming out of those 2-inch speakers on the television. And I just couldn't believe it. It was like the Dan Rather News or something. And come to find out that there was, it was an open air, they had a service of remembrance for right on the beach where that plane went down, and the choir was singing "Set Me as a Seal," and it was just,
wow.
it was, which wasn't odd. What was odd is to walk in the door and and all of a sudden on the little TV you're hearing your piece right as you walk in. So it's been sung at a number of occasions. I got a nice, lovely letter from a man in Israel who had sung it with his choir at the Church of the Immaculate Conception there in Jerusalem. So what I've been happy to experience in that piece is that it's been able, I think, to help a lot of people, both in a beneficent way at times of difficulty or tragedy, or in a very loving way as a time of wedding. That's probably more than you wanted to hear about that piece.
Oh, no, that is quite wonderful. A lot of people need to know that background, because I'm sure you have choirs who are singing that piece all over it, and it is a beautiful piece, but that background is certainly so profound. And what I would like to do now, if you have a moment, I would like to actually play Set Me as a Seal, composed by Rene Clausen, sung by the Concordia Choir. Such a beautiful piece. I was honored to conduct Set Me as a Seal as one of my pieces on my graduate conducting recital when I was at Shenandoah Conservatory, so it's quite an honor to hear that piece again.
Well, thank you so much.
I want to move on and ask you a couple of questions in terms of your career. Now that you are actually this year celebrating your 25th year as conductor of Concordia Choir, and I want to know, after all these years, how do you as a conductor maintain that freshness and youthfulness in the sound of your ensemble?
Boy, 25 years, a long time. And you said that, and the question was how I would maintain what? I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
the freshness and the youthfulness in your choir sound?
Well, I think that the students do a lot to keep you young. Sometimes they'd say they do a lot to make you old, but not really. When you work, I've worked all my life with college-age students, basically. It's where I've spent my career. And when you're around young people, there's a certain kind of energy. They're always about the same age. I've been noticing that as I've gotten older. College students are always the same age. They come in at 18 and graduate at 22, and I just keep getting a year older every year. But that's that great time. It's that great time in their life when they're just really an open conduit. They're experiencing so much about themselves, not only academically, but who they are as a sentient person away from their birth family. They're learning and growing. It's a time when they're excited about what it means to become educated, what it means to make music at a high level. And, there's been many times where I'm very tired. We rehearse at 4:30 in the afternoon, 4:30 till 6 every day. And if I've been particularly busy or engaged in another activity, I think, where am I going to get the energy? And I walk into choir, and all of their energy just kind of makes me bumped up. And at 6 o'clock comes, and I'm still ready to go for another hour. So I think there's a large part of that for anyone who works with young people is you can easily glom onto their energy and their newness. This is in many ways when they do the literature that you're doing at the college level, this is all new to them. Hopefully, they were doing literature and music in high school that was appropriate for that level, and they get to the collegiate level experience and are suddenly doing pieces of various composers through 5 centuries of choral music, everything from Renaissance to music written very recently. So I think that's exciting for all of us together, to have this music in front of us that seems eternal anyway. I think anyone who works in music, especially in choral music, if you don't have passion and excitement for what you do, it's soon going to show. So I hope I have someone that's a good enough friend to tell me, Clausen, you better hang it up. If you can't really feel that passion anymore, then it's time to pass the baton.
Speaking of passion and passing the baton, that leads me into my next question. What is the impact, or could you rather discuss the impact of Dale Worland on your career as a choral conductor?
Well, I think when you speak of Dale, you speak of not only myself, but every other conductor in our region, and if not in our region, nationally. Dale, when he was, I think, at McAllister, I hope I'm not recalling the wrong college, but I think Dale for many years was at McAllister College in the Twin Cities, and then started when I think it was about the early 70s, the Dale Worland Singers. And he developed this into a truly professional choir. In this country, we don't have many of those. We've really grown up with the European symphonic tradition and many professional orchestras, scattered throughout our country that are excellent professional orchestras. Yet, it doesn't seem to have worked that way in choruses. We expect choruses to be volunteer, and even the major symphony choruses associated with many symphonies are volunteer organizations. And it hasn't seemed to have stopped choral singing. It seemed to be growing by leaps and bounds nationally. But Dale was able to really establish a professional chorus that could be an instrument for many new pieces and new composers. And one of the great features that Dale's been able to do is hold a conviction of being dedicated to new music and doing new pieces, commissioning new pieces from modern living composers. And I respect that tremendously, his commitment to new music and to developing and commissioning new pieces for chorus that he could do with his outstanding choir. And Dale has a wonderful ear for balance, especially. When you hear the radiance of the Dale Worthen singer's sound, you always know it's very carefully refined and balanced and elegant in its interpretation. So when you look at what he's accomplished over those many years of both advocating for new composers and for all that he did with the Worthen singers and the many recordings that he's made, I don't think there's one of us that doesn't owe him a debt of gratitude.
And certainly, just like Dr. Worthen, you yourself are dedicated to training aspiring conductors, and I want to know if you could possibly speak on the subject of the Rene Choral School, which will be back in session this summer.
Right. Yeah. I guess we took one summer off, but I think that we had done it for 11 previous summers, as I recall. And what that is about is a week-long event in the summer. And we called it Choral School because, in a way, it does not try to be a workshop so much as a more in-depth experience for about a week, where we essentially have most all of the day together and part of the evening. So it's a rather in-depth experience of a group of conductors, and it varies every year as to how many, but they usually are coming from, I think on average, 25 to 30 states, so all around the country, from east to west to north to south, and every level, from church choir director to collegiate level, high school level, community chorus directors. Community choirs are the largest growing segment of choral music in our country, and so more and more of those types have made their way to the choral school. And you know what happens when you put 65, 70, 80, 90 conductors from everywhere together is you're talking shop for a week. You know, it's a rich, fertile ground for just exchanging ideas. We ask people to bring favorite pieces with them. We try and expose them to lots of different types of literature, sharing ideas together. I do my professional shtick with them, essentially turning them into a big chorale and doing my choral thing with them. And then I'll also do separate lectures on various aspects of ensemble, of technique, of performance practice, interpretation, working with voices, all of those areas. And then always we'll have a guest or two, sometimes two, during the week. And we've had some outstanding, as a matter of fact, Dale Worthen was our first guest, the very first one for the first choral school. And we've had many, many outstanding guests. And I know I would leave out somebody, but Andre Thomas and Anton Armstrong and many conductors. Z. Randall Stroop has been here with us. Rollo Dilworth has been here. Weston Noble has been our guest. We've had many of the most outstanding people in the country. Joe Michael Scheibe, I think, of another one. I'm just trying to think of who's all been here, and I know I've left some out, but many of the finest conductors in the country come for a day or two to share their expertise. And what we always try and do in the choral school is to allow the guests to do what they want to do, what excites them about whatever it is in their choral life that they most want to share. And what happens in that week after, when you've been talking and singing and eating together all week, you go home with your batteries recharged. And I think if we do that, if I have that as the premier goal of what we try and do to be solid, to create solid choral music education, to take experienced conductors and from everyone from people who have been conducting 30, 40 years to new students. And we have special scholarship for new conductors coming into the profession. It's really extraordinary when you put all of those together. As a matter of fact, I recall, I think I do this nearly every year, and the first meeting I'll ask them to raise their hands by 5-year increments for how many years they've been conducting. And there's always a segment to our 5 years and less. And then there are always another segment at the far end who have been conductors for 35 or 40 years. And I find it always an inspiration, and I will tell the young conductors, look to see who's around you. These people who have been conducting 35, 40 years, but what do they choose to do with the week in their summer? Go and learn some more. And I find that totally inspiring. That no one knows it all. You open the door and you find that there are 2 more behind it.
I would certainly be remiss if I ended this interview and didn't share 2 things with you. The first thing is that quite a few years ago, right after 9/11, I was honored. At that time, I was very active in the American Choral Directors Association, and I was so honored to be in Avery Fisher Hall as you premiered your work, Memorial.
You were there.
With the Concordia Choir and the orchestra, and that was such a moving work. Could you maybe talk about the emotions that ran through your head as you prepared such a work for such a tragic event?
Oh, yeah, I could talk way too long about that, but I'll try and put the thumbnail sketch into it. That was one of the, I think I'm fortunate to have great musical moments every year, all the time, in rehearsal and performance. But, I look back at that as one of the highlight moments, musical moments in my life, where this was shortly after. It was 2003, and the events of 9/11 in New York City were still rather raw. It was still a big hurt, and a nation that was still reeling from all of this. And so both the writing of the piece in the months ahead of the premiere, the teaching of it here at Concordia to our choir, our orchestra, my friend and colleague Peter Halverson, for whom I wrote the solo, all of that was happening still at a time where we needed healing. And if I would talk about anything that affected me the most, and probably all of us, that day where we did actually 3 performances of that piece in the day, the 2 in Lincoln Center, and then we closed with one at the Riverside Church that night, in which New Yorkers, for the first 2 it was ACDA members, and the New Yorkers were invited for the final one that night, and that was almost the most powerful one because of that. Is that the piece, though there's a lot of drama and a lot of fuss and feathers that happen to reflect the falling of the towers, and that drama is there. You heard it. It's that's a very visceral part of the first third of the piece. However, the remaining 2/3 of it really are more philosophical. They're about finding common ground. Part of the text written again by my good friend and colleague Roy Hammerling here at Concordia, who wrote a series of prayers following the events of 9/11, and I used several of his prayers in that piece, which seek after finding common ground. If we're ever going to lay down the swords, we're going to have to find a way to avoid simple retribution, because if you constantly poke each other's eyes out, you wind up just being blind. And I forget who said that. It might have been Gandhi, and I didn't quote it very well. But what I remember from the end of that, especially those performances, that it asks us. I ended with Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, and that's all you really can do. You finally, in the end, you hope and pray for a nation, a world that has to stop fighting at some point. So I think of it as a healing piece, and one that I'll be doing again at this September 11th on the 10th anniversary at Lincoln Center.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I recall that performance that you did at Lincoln Center. The thing that really set the tone for me was that the orchestra played Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings, which has been used with so many memorial services and observance of. It seems like that's like the universal piece that's used as a tragic time, and then to hear that piece precede this larger work, it was such a reverent experience.
You know, you're absolutely right. I think the Barber Adagio started back in the late 40s, if I recall, maybe even with Roosevelt's death. But I remember through major national events, such as Kennedy, when John F. Kennedy was shot. I remember the Barber Adagio being played on the radio and television many times over throughout that time, and you just, I think, are so correct that piece, the Barber Adagio for strings, has gained a kind of place in our national psyche for times of national mourning. And it just seems when we planned that performance that was the perfect way to set up this piece, and I'm glad you remembered that.
Thank you. Well, Dr. Clausen, it has been certainly my distinct privilege to speak to you this afternoon. This is almost a full circle moment for me. I remember my mentor gave me a disc, and it was a recording of the cantata A New Creation so many years ago. I think it was like 1993 that I first heard Set Me as a Seal, and I never would realize that I would be conducting that piece on a graduate conducting recital, and let alone speaking to you live on the air in 2011. So I want to say thank you so much for sharing your work with the Concordia Choir and your career as a composer with us today.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and thank you for what you do for all of us in classical music and choral music, and for the opportunity to talk about all of this today with you. We look forward to being in Washington, D.C. very soon.
Yes, and again, listeners, I do want to draw your attention that the Concordia Choir, under the direction of Dr. Rene Clausen, will perform at the National Presbyterian Church on February the 19th of this month. What I'd like to do now, just as we close, I would like to play a recording of All Ye That Have Life and Breath by Rene Clausen, sung by the Richard Zielinski Singers.
All that have life and breath, praise thee, O Lord, shout to thy Lord, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Praise the Lord with joyful song. Praise the Lord with thanksgiving, hallelujah. Praise him, praise the Lord with joyful song, hallelujah.
This has been Patrick D. McCoy, the African American voice in classical music, and have a good day.